Did you know a young priest once chose to walk into a place the world had abandoned, where the sick were feared and forgotten? In a land of exile, he did not bring only words of hope, but a life that would be broken and shared among the suffering. He embraced their wounds, their loneliness, and even their fate. This is the story of Saint Damien of Molokai. Before beginning, drop an Amen in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories of the saints. Don't forget to share it so others may discover this story and be inspired to live holier lives. Chapter 1. The Historical Setting and Childhood. On the 3rd of January 1840, in the quiet village of Tremello in Belgium, a child was born into a devout Catholic family, a place where faith was not merely spoken, but lived each day. This child, who would one day be known to the world as Saint Damien of Molokai, first opened his eyes in a home shaped by prayer, discipline, and trust in God's providence. He was given the name Joseph de Veuster, the youngest son in a large farming family. As the last born, he grew up surrounded by older siblings who had already begun to shape their own paths in life. Though simple and rural, his home was rich in values, humility, obedience, and a deep respect for God. These early influences quietly formed the foundation of his future holiness. In this family, the call to serve God was not unfamiliar. Some of his brothers and sisters chose religious life, offering themselves fully to the church. Their witness was not imposed upon Joseph, but it stirred something within him. He saw in them a different kind of joy, one rooted not in comfort, but in surrender. Their example planted seeds that would grow slowly but surely in his heart. Yet his early years were not easy. Life as a farmer's son demanded hard work, and Joseph had to leave school at a young age to help support his family. His hands became accustomed to labor more than books. Though this limited his formal education, it formed in him a strength of character, resilience, and a closeness to the struggles of ordinary people, qualities that would later define his mission. His family hoped he would follow a practical path, preparing for a future in trade. It was a reasonable plan, offering stability and security. For a time, Joseph accepted this direction, stepping into the world of commerce with obedience. Yet deep within, there remained a quiet restlessness, a sense that his life was meant for something more than earthly success. That deeper call began to take shape through encounters with missionary preaching. Listening to stories of distant lands and souls longing for God, his heart was stirred in a way he could not ignore. These were not just stories to him, they were invitations. Slowly, he began to recognize the gentle but persistent voice of God, calling him beyond the familiar, beyond comfort, into a life of greater purpose. From that moment on, a new desire took root within him, a desire not just to believe, but to give. Joseph no longer dreamed of personal success, but of offering his entire life in service to God and to those most in need. Though the path ahead was still unclear, his heart had already chosen. The boy from Tremello had begun his journey toward becoming a servant of love for the forgotten. Chapter 2. Vocation and Religious Life. As the quiet call of God grew stronger within his heart, Joseph made a decisive step that would change the course of his life. He entered the congregation of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, a missionary order devoted to spreading the love of Christ to the world. In this new community, he began to leave behind the life he once knew, embracing instead a path of prayer, sacrifice, and total dedication. Upon entering religious life, he received a new name, Damien. This name was chosen in honor of an early Christian martyr, a witness of faith who had given his life for Christ. In taking this name, he was not merely adopting a title, but accepting a mission. It was a quiet yet profound sign that his life too would be marked by sacrifice, courage, and unwavering fidelity. Yet his journey was not without difficulty. Those responsible for his formation initially doubted his intellectual ability. Having left school early, Damien lacked the formal education expected of a future priest. Some wondered whether he would be capable of completing the necessary studies. These doubts, however, did not discourage him. Instead, they became an opportunity for humility, perseverance, and trust in God's grace. With determination, Damien devoted himself to study, especially in learning Latin, the language required for theology and priestly formation. What he lacked in academic background, he made up for with diligence and discipline. Day by day, he pushed forward, not seeking recognition, but simply desiring to respond faithfully to God's call. His progress was steady, a quiet testimony to the power of perseverance rooted in faith. In 1860, after years of formation, he professed his religious vows, offering his life fully to God. This moment marked a deep interior surrender as he bound himself to a life of obedience, poverty, and chastity. From that point forward, he no longer belonged to himself. His life became a gift placed entirely in the hands of God, ready to be sent wherever the Lord desired. Within his heart, a particular desire continued to grow, the longing to become a missionary. He did not wish for a life of comfort or stability, but for a life poured out in service to those who had not yet encountered Christ. The stories of distant lands and suffering people stirred him deeply, shaping in him a burning zeal to go wherever the need was greatest. Each day, Damien prayed with this intention, often placing himself under the example of St. Francis Xavier, the great missionary of the Church. Before an image of this saint, he would ask God for the grace to be sent far away, to bring the gospel to those in need. In this prayer, his vocation matured a quiet readiness to say yes, no matter the cost. Chapter 3. Mission in Hawaii and the Time of Disease. When the long-awaited opportunity for mission finally came, it arrived in an unexpected way. Damien's brother, who had been assigned to travel to Hawaii, fell ill and could not go. In a quiet turn of providence, Damien offered to take his place. What seemed like a simple substitution would become the defining path of his life, a journey that would lead him far from home. In 1864, Damien arrived in Honolulu, stepping onto unfamiliar soil with a heart ready to serve. That same year, he was ordained a priest, receiving the sacred responsibility to bring Christ to the people entrusted to him. It was a moment of deep grace, but also the beginning of a demanding mission. The land was beautiful, yet marked by suffering that he would soon come to know intimately. He was assigned to serve among the native Hawaiian communities, traveling between parishes, celebrating the sacraments, and teaching the faith. His ministry was simple and faithful, rooted in presence rather than prestige. He learned to live among the people, sharing their daily struggles, listening to their stories, and offering them not only words of faith, but the quiet comfort of a shepherd who truly cared. But beneath the beauty of the islands, a grave crisis was unfolding. Waves of disease had begun to spread across the population. Leprosy, smallpox, cholera, and other illnesses brought from abroad. These diseases moved swiftly and mercilessly, touching families and villages with devastating force. Damien could not ignore what he saw. Suffering was no longer distant, but all around him, calling for a response. The native Hawaiians, lacking immunity to these foreign diseases, suffered greatly. Entire communities were weakened, and many lives were lost in a short span of time. The sorrow was not only physical, but deeply human. Families torn apart, children orphaned, hope fading. Damien stood in the midst of this reality, witnessing not numbers, but faces, each one a person loved by God. As the crisis deepened, society itself began to feel the strain. Resources were limited, and the systems in place were unable to respond adequately to the growing need. Fear spread alongside disease, and those afflicted were often pushed aside or isolated. What unfolded was not only a medical emergency, but a profound humanitarian crisis, revealing both the fragility and the dignity of human life. In the midst of all this, something began to take root in Damien's heart. What he encountered did not lead him to despair, but to compassion. The suffering he witnessed awakened in him a deeper love, one that would soon call him to go even further. Without fully knowing where it would lead, he began to sense that God was preparing him for a mission unlike any he had imagined. Chapter 4. The Tragedy of Molokai, a Forgotten Place. As disease spread across the Hawaiian Islands, fear began to shape decisions that would change countless lives. The government, seeking to contain the spread of leprosy, enacted a law that required those infected to be isolated from society. Though intended as protection, it brought deep suffering. Families were torn apart without warning, and those diagnosed were taken away, often with no hope of ever returning home again. Under this policy, thousands were forcibly relocated to the remote Kalaupapa Peninsula on the island of Molokai. Over time, nearly 8,000 people would be sent there, not because they had committed any crime, but because they were sick. This place, meant to separate them from the rest of society, slowly became a place of exile where the unwanted were gathered and largely forgotten by the world they once belonged to. Kalaupapa itself was a place of striking beauty, yet also of harsh isolation. Surrounded by the ocean and cut off by towering cliffs, it was nearly impossible to leave. Those sent there quickly realized that this was not a temporary refuge, but a permanent separation. The land, though peaceful in appearance, became a silent prison, holding within it the pain, loneliness, and longing of those who lived there. Life in the settlement was marked by great hardship. There were few doctors, limited supplies, and almost no organized system of care. Food was scarce, shelter was inadequate, and many struggled simply to survive from one day to the next. Without proper support, the sick were left to care for themselves as best they could, often in conditions that only worsened their suffering. In such a place, despair began to take root. Without guidance, hope, or structure, many turned to destructive habits. Violence, drunkenness, and disorder became common, not because the people were without goodness, but because they had been abandoned. When suffering is left unattended, it often distorts the human spirit, and the community of Molokai bore the weight of that painful truth. Even more devastating than the physical illness was the loss of dignity. Those who had once been part of families and communities were now treated as outcasts. They began to believe the lie that they were no longer worthy of love or care. Their wounds were not only on their bodies, but deep within their hearts, where loneliness and rejection slowly eroded their sense of hope. Yet the church could not ignore this suffering. Seeing the spiritual and human need, it called for volunteers, priests willing to go and live among the lepers, to bring them not only the sacraments, but also compassion and presence. It was a dangerous mission, one that required courage and sacrifice. And in that moment of need, a call was quietly waiting for a man ready to answer with his life. Chapter 5. Mission in Molokai. Love made flesh. On the 10th of May 1873, Father Damien arrived at Kalaupapa, stepping into a world many feared to enter. He came not as a distant visitor, but as a shepherd, willing to dwell among his flock. Before him stood a community wounded in body and spirit, longing not only for care, but for love. In that moment, his mission became clear: to remain present where others would not go. At first, the plan was simple. Priests would rotate their service, each staying only a short time before returning to safety. But as Damien witnessed the depth of suffering, his heart would not allow him to leave. What began as a temporary mission soon became a lifelong commitment. He asked to remain, choosing not comfort, but fidelity, embracing the place others feared as his permanent home. In time, Damien spoke words that revealed the depth of his love. We lepers. He no longer saw himself as separate from those he served. He did not stand above them, but among them. In this simple yet profound expression, he embraced their condition, their suffering, and their dignity. It was not a gesture of sympathy, but a true sharing of life, rooted in the love of Christ. He lived as they lived, without distance or privilege. He ate the same food, shared the same spaces, and accepted the same risks. There were no barriers between him and the people. He listened to their stories, touched their wounds, and walked beside them in their daily struggles. Through this closeness, he restored something many had lost, the sense that they were not alone. But Damien's love was not only personal, it was also practical. He began to build what the community lacked. Houses replaced broken shelters, a church rose where prayer could gather hearts, and simple structures provided care for the sick. He organized the building of schools and even prepared places for the dead, ensuring that no one would be forgotten, even in death. As the physical environment improved, so too did the life of the community. Damien helped establish order where there had been chaos. He encouraged responsibility, mutual care, and respect among the residents. Slowly, dignity returned. People began to see themselves not as outcasts, but as a community once again. In restoring structure, he helped restore hope. Through all of this, Damien became more than a priest. He became a living sign of Christ's presence. In a place marked by pain and abandonment, he revealed a love that did not withdraw. His life spoke louder than words, showing that no one is beyond God's care. Among the suffering of Molokai, the love of Christ was no longer distant. It had taken flesh and lived among them. Chapter 6. The Final Years and a Holy Death. One ordinary day, as Father Damien prepared a bath, he placed his foot into scalding water and felt no pain. In that moment, he understood what his body revealed. He had contracted leprosy. The disease he had lived among, the suffering he had embraced in others, had now become his own. There was no panic, no retreat, only a quiet acceptance of what God had allowed. Instead of withdrawing, Damien's love grew even stronger. Knowing his time might be limited, he gave himself more completely to those around him. His ministry did not slow, it deepened. He continued to preach, to comfort, and to serve, not from a place of strength, but from within the very suffering he once sought to relieve. His presence became even more powerful because it was now fully shared. As the illness progressed, his body began to weaken. Wounds appeared, strength faded, and simple tasks became increasingly difficult. Yet he did not allow pain to define him. Each hardship became an offering, a silent prayer united with Christ. Those who saw him no longer saw only a priest, but a man who was living the gospel in its most radical and tangible form. During these final years, God sent him companions to support the mission. Among them was Saint Marianne Cope, whose presence brought care, order, and compassion. Together with other helpers, they continued the work Damien had begun. Their service was not a replacement, but a continuation, proof that love, once planted, continues to grow beyond one life. Even as his strength declined, Damien remained focused on completing what had been entrusted to him. He ensured that the community would continue to flourish, that structures would remain, and that care would not cease. He worked not for recognition, but for those who would come after him. His final efforts were marked by urgency, but also by peace, knowing that his mission was nearing fulfillment. Spiritually, he prepared himself for the moment of meeting God. He received the sacraments with devotion, entrusting his soul to the mercy of Christ. There was no fear, only surrender. The man who had spent his life bringing others closer to God now walked that final path himself, guided by the same faith he had shared with so many in their final moments. On the 15th of April, 1889, Father Damien passed from this life at the age of 49. He died among the very people he had chosen to love, having given everything without reserve. His life had become a complete offering, a witness that true charity does not count the cost. In death, as in life, he remained what he had always been, a servant of love, faithful to the end. Chapter 7. Canonization, Veneration, and Spiritual Legacy. After his death, Father Damien came to be known by a title that captured the essence of his life, the Apostle of the Lepers. It was not a title he sought, but one given by those who saw in him a love that did not turn away. In a place where others saw fear and rejection, he saw Christ, and in serving the suffering, he became a true witness of the gospel. Even during his lifetime, his story had already begun to spread far beyond the shores of Hawaii. News of his work reached Europe and America, touching hearts and inspiring many. People who had never seen Molokai were moved by the courage of a priest who chose to live among the abandoned. His life became a testimony that charity, when lived fully, speaks to the entire world. Yet after his death, not all voices were in his favor. Some criticized his methods and questioned his character, attempting to diminish his work. In the midst of these accusations, the writer Robert Louis Stevenson rose in his defense. Having visited Molokai himself, he spoke boldly of Damien's goodness, helping to restore the truth and protect the integrity of his legacy. As time passed, the Church carefully examined his life, not only through history, but also through signs of God's grace. 2 miracles were attributed to his intercession, confirming that his love did not end with death. These events were not seen as isolated wonders, but as a continuation of the compassion he had shown in life, now reaching souls in need through prayer. In 1995, his heroic virtue was officially recognized when he was beatified by Pope John Paul II. The Church affirmed that his life was worthy of imitation, a path marked by self-giving love. For many, this moment brought renewed attention to his mission, reminding the world that holiness often grows quietly in places of suffering and hidden sacrifice. Years later, in 2009, he was canonized by Pope Benedict XVI and declared a saint of the Universal Church. This solemn recognition confirmed what countless people already believed, that Damien's life was a true reflection of Christ's love. His name was now placed among the saints, not for extraordinary power, but for extraordinary charity lived in ordinary faithfulness. Today, Saint Damien of Molokai stands as a global symbol of Christian charity. His life continues to inspire those who serve the sick, the poor, and the forgotten. In a world still marked by division and suffering, his witness reminds us that love can cross every boundary. Through his example, we are invited to see Christ in others and to serve without fear, just as he did. Chapter 8. A Prayer to Saint Damien. O Saint Damien, faithful servant of Christ, teach me to love those who are rejected, forgotten, and cast aside by the world. Help me to see beyond appearances and recognize the dignity of every human person. May my heart not turn away in fear or indifference, but open in compassion, just as yours did among those who suffered most. Grant me the courage to step into places of pain and suffering, where hope seems lost and wounds run deep. When I am tempted to remain comfortable and distant, remind me of your example. Strengthen my spirit so I may walk beside those in need, bringing not only words, but a presence filled with kindness, patience, and genuine care. Give me, O Lord, through the intercession of Saint Damien, a generous heart that is willing to sacrifice. Teach me to give not only what is easy, but what truly costs me something. May I learn to serve without expecting reward, to love without limits, and to offer myself freely, trusting that every act of charity reflects your divine love. Help me not to be afraid of illness, suffering, or hardship. When I face trials that weaken my body or trouble my soul, remind me that your grace is sufficient. Through the example of Saint Damien, may I learn to endure with faith, to remain steadfast in difficulty, and to trust that even suffering can become a path to holiness. Open my eyes, Lord, so that I may recognize your presence in those who suffer the most, in the poor, the sick, the lonely, and the forgotten. Let me see not burdens, but your beloved children. May I never overlook them, but approach them with reverence, knowing that in serving them, I am truly serving you. Sustain me each day in my vocation, whatever path you have called me to follow. When I grow weary or discouraged, lift me up with your grace. Through the prayers of Saint Damien, help me remain faithful in small things, persevering with love, and trusting that every hidden act of service has eternal value in your eyes. Lead me, O Lord, to live a life of perfect charity, as Saint Damien did. Let my actions reflect your mercy, my words bring hope, and my life become a witness of your love. May I never turn away from those in need, but embrace them with courage and humility, until the day I come to rest in you. Amen.